want this to be a bit of a quick one, but oof, out of context, we're talking about horror movies. I wanted to kind of discuss how I have a least favorite genre for horror movies. That one being torture porn. Hooray for restricting myself on YouTube talks. There's no other way to phrase it. Torture enjoyment films. No, not really. These are obviously a very struggle of a barrel of movies to get into. The iceberg effect, if you will. I'm not going to dive too deep into which ones are which, but in this case, I've watched a selection over the past month, mostly because of my Hooptober, but I wanted to allow it to let me explore what I owned as physical media and see what I liked. Some of it I didn't know would be as harsh as it was, some of it I didn't realize if I'd like anything about it, and if I was misunderstood into what it actually was. Saw, for example, not really torture porn. I mean, vaguely, like, it's traps. Sure, if you get enjoyment from the traps, I'm like, yeah, I don't mind it, it's fun, but it's also escape room stuff, it's about the detective stuff, it's not about, yeah, let's watch these people get brutally murdered. It's like, no, it's their own choice, kind of, but not really, but kind of, but that's a different kind of thing. There's a campiness to it, but it's also a filming and stylistic that looks real, and I think that works. It levitates it between the two, where it's not some cheesy looking blood and gore like something like Hellraiser would be, despite the fact that I still like Hellraiser quite a lot, and I regard that as more torture porn in a way because of the fact that people literally get pleasure in the movie from being tortured. Then there is a movie like Martyrs, which was quite tough to watch at the second half of it because it is, by that stage, this person is getting tortured in the most brutal way possible, and it's for a long period of time in the film, and if you enjoy it while watching it, that's sick. If you don't, like, sick is in disgusting, that's messed up, but if you watch it and you're like, this is messed up and revolting, that's kind of the appropriate way to look at it. I don't enjoy that. Because again, the pornography element is, do you enjoy it? Is it something that's meant to be gross or obscure or taboo that you enjoy, and it is in that field, and it's very tough to watch because of that, but as a film, and as a character study, and as a study of ideas, it's really interesting. It was very different to what I expect, like, in contrast to Saw. Saw is like, it's like child's play, it's just escape rooms and just really dramatic traps that could get you into some really tough bodily gore stuff, like where someone has to cut off their own arm just to have enough of a level of meat in a dish so they can survive, in contrast to the other person, the other kid, who has to chop off their belly fat. There's stuff like that sure, if you're not into gore, then yeah. But that's the kind of, I guess, porn-ish stuff. That's the stuff that I like watching. But what they do in something like Martyrs, it's about the effect. Are you meant to enjoy it because it's fucked up, or are you not? Because I'm pretty sure in Martyrs you're not meant to enjoy it, and that's what's the deceitful part of it, the ugly nature of it. Something like Last House on the Left, which is, it's not exactly torturous, but it's gratuitous in how dark and messed up and brutal it is.
Apparently, if I looked them up, and they're actually known as splatter films, the dramatic splatter films being the obvious, Martyrs and Hostel and Wolf Creek and stuff like that, whereas then you've got your kind of more, I guess, comedic ones, or at least, cheesier 80s ones with, like, Hellraiser and Evil Dead and stuff like that. So the fact that they're called splatter films is the reason this video is probably going to be titled Splatter Films. I don't know, it's a weird thing, but that's what they call them. I guess it's because the torture element comes from the characters getting tortured, and can you enjoy watching that, or are you like cringing and turning away, or how is it affecting you, how is it affecting the character, and what does it do for the plot? So it's those kind of levels, but it's interesting nevertheless. But it's always about the kind of the blood and the gore and how people are getting tortured, basically.
And that's the kind of thing, despite me having not watched stuff like Hostel, or I think maybe High Tension might be one of them, but like, there's a lot of films in this genre I have not looked into. But when I pin it up with, like, as a 4-block square, you've got Saw, you've got Hellraiser, you've got Martyrs, you've got Last House on the Left. Martyrs and Last House on the Left are similar, but artistic for different reasons. Martyrs, I think, is a better film, both in terms of style and character, and it's just a better film overall. It's actually quite enjoyable to watch. That part of it that's really heavy on the torture is like, nah, not for me. No, thank you very much. But the ending of it is a really interesting, beautiful result. It's terrifying and really sad, but it's really interesting. Last House on the Left is just brutal, but then you also get these weird zany moments with the cops and you get the banjo music playing, and it's like, okay, so clearly this is like amateur as shit. But like the idea and the struggle and what they're doing and what they're showcasing is unique, especially because it's a film that's more, because of the time period it was released in, the interest comes more of what it was displaying, what it was, around with Vietnam and all this kind of stuff, all that kind of brutal, gruesome stuff, and how this can be so close to home. Stuff like that, that's like, it's a really interesting commentary on that, but I don't like the film. I don't like how it displays the ideas as well, and I think that's probably what you can maybe consider the remake as well. I haven't seen the remake yet, but the remake doesn't have that context because, I mean, maybe it's a post 9/11 film. It could have that context, but it doesn't have it to the depravity of the original. And I think the original is quite depraved. I don't mind something like Hills Have Eyes. It's not really torture, but it's still that kind of a bit. It's dark and brutal and gnarly. But that's a more survival thing, whereas a different kind of survival thing where it looks like there's a kind of freedom to survive, where in The Last House on the Left there isn't, and it's brutal and it's ugly and it's purposely designed to make you uncomfortable, and I don't like it for that reason. It's uncomfortable. I don't enjoy it. That you get one section of that in Martyrs, but for The Last House on the Left, it's almost the entire runtime. I know the end of it is more revenge, but it's like, it doesn't feel like I'm happy that these people were murdered after the fact that they committed such a heinous atrocity. But then you get the polar opposites, the campy fun ones that are less about the torture and more about the lore and the characters and the zany designs. With Hellraiser, you get the creature designs and the lore, and you get the people trying to survive against the Cenobites, but the fact that the torture is that they come from a hell world. They use torture to get like energy or fuel or whatever, I can't remember. But, they benefit from you being tortured and hooked up with chains and getting your body ripped to pieces. It's really emphasized in the second one because it explains like what all the Cenobites came from and the kind of torturous shit that they put themselves through to become this ultimate pain machine. It's interesting. It's a more, again, kind of campy, cartoonish version, and I liked it a lot more. It can still be a bit tough to watch with the blood and gore, especially when the person gets ripped to pieces, but at the same time, it's interesting. Contrast that again to Saw, which is more grounded in how it's shot and filmed and edited. I mean, it's still crazy editing, but like, it's meant to be more realistic and more brutal because of the realism. This isn't French New Wave torture porn, but it is, I guess, Australian, because it's written and directed by an Australian guy. It's a very interesting film and a very interesting series, and I really enjoy the Saw films. I've only just gone into them as of this past month, but I've really enjoyed watching them because, again, they're about the baseline traps and escaping the traps, and hence escape room stuff. But on top of that is the detective plot, the plot with John Kramer, the plot with Jigsaw, the plot with all the twists and turns and different angles. It doesn't exactly become less about the traps, but it highlights the traps in different textual ways. Some of them are just, here are people in traps, watch them get brutally murdered and or escape. Or there's, hey, these people are really messed up and now they're in traps. Let's see if they deserve to escape. The pleasure comes from the characters who are in the traps and if they're good, redeemable characters or not, and if they deserve this punishment, because that's the whole point of the films, or at least that's the point of the traps, is that these are people who have done bad in their life and are getting punished for it by Jigsaw, which is what makes them really fun and interesting. And again, you got 10 of them to choose from, so you got at least 7 out of 10 are really good, or I'd say 8 out of 10 are really good, worth watching. So, and even that ninth one, not too bad. But that last one, poor he, not good. Check out my Calm and Relaxed talk. I dive in all of them. There are spoilers later in the video, but for the early part, I just ranked them as to which one's the least worth watching. But yeah, so I've used this past month to examine these types of films. Almost by chance. I wasn't intending to. I had added Martyrs and Last House on the Left to my list for Hooptober. I didn't expect Last House on the Left to be what it was. I think that's maybe why I didn't like it as much, because I didn't expect it to be this kind of graphic, brutal movie, but at the same time, it was always going to be that way, because that's what it's been since it was released. Martyrs, on the other hand, I knew that there was a brutality going into it. I knew that there was some torture porn aspect going into it. So I expected it, but even then, I didn't expect what they would do, and then what the result would be. I don't like how long it lingers on the torture element of it, but it's still well conceived and well achieved in terms of as a filmmaking front. It's a struggle to watch, and I don't love it, but I do think that it is well designed, and I do think it's a good film. You know, it's that torture porn. It's that new extremism. What is it? I don't know. That horror extremism, new wave stuff that they were talking about in the early 2000s with France to give some extra juice and zest to horror, instead of it being people coming after you trying to slash you to death or monsters bursting out of your chest. It's, what if it was just regular people and they were just doing the most brutal, inhumane stuff to a person just to see what had happened? You know, just for fun. Let's see what happens. That's what it's more like in Last House on the Left. It's just for fun. Let's see what happens. The moral consciousness is still there, but it's like it's very restrictive, and it's mostly you as an audience being like, yuck, I don't like this, yuck, I don't like this. Martyrs has a point to prove, and that at least is worthwhile. If it was real, like if this was a documentary, I'd be like, fuck off, I'm never watching this, because that doesn't interest me. I don't get pleasure out of that. But again, it depends on the style, the level of camp, I guess, how realistic, how suggestive, what the point of it is. If it is just there to be brutal, probably not. But if it's there to actually have commentary, to have a point, to... I mean, obviously The Last House on the Left still has a commentary, it still has a point. In the narrative, it needs to have commentary and a point, I think. Because in reality, yeah, sure, it's a commentary on like the realistic stuff with Vietnam and how messed up people are just in your backyard, that kind of stuff, you know. That stuff I get. But I much prefer it in Martyrs, at least, because Martyrs has a narrative function for it all. And it's ultimately a dramatic thing that could have been completely avoided, which makes it even more sad. But yeah, that's the last part of the film, the latter half of the film. But yeah, it's good. I would suggest Martyrs. It's tricky to watch. It's hard to watch. So I'd be considerable. I wouldn't suggest Last House on Left unless either it's the remake or you're a big fan of Wes Craven. Even then, still iffy. I think the remake is like the same, but just modern, so still a bit iffy. Saw, I'd suggest. If you don't like, not torture, if you don't like gore, you won't like it. But if you can have fun with that and be like, damn, this is fun. But then also the real fun part is the detective story and the shit with like Amanda and Hoffman and Kramer and all the many characters it has and all the plot lines, that's when it gets really fun. Like, and it's more about that. The traps are just like a cherry on top kind of deal. And yeah, then there's Hellraiser, which if you know Hellraiser, you know Hellraiser. So yeah, I don't want to dive more into this genre. That's why I wanted to make this be the video that I talked about with it. I know that there are the Hostel films and shit like that. I don't want to experience that, if ever. Definitely not anytime soon. Again, it's not a genre I'm very interested in. I feel like it's hard to define genre torture porn, but you know it when you see it. It's basically when someone just gets tortured and you have to like either relish in it or whatever. But there's different forms of torture as well. Something like Evil Dead 2 is a different kind of torture because it's got a campy value to it. You know, it has fun, But the torture is just like, oh, it's fun because we're watching Bruce Campbell smash plates on his head. It's campy. It's got a different style to it, a different energy. But yeah, so that's all I got to say on that. That's all. Thanks for watching. I wouldn't say let me know of any of these films, but let me know what films I should avoid down below. Hostel's like the only ones I really know. I guess realistically, like I feel like Human Centipede's in that in that avenue, but that's just like messed up films. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time, and enjoy the rest of the spooky season. Goodbye. I'm out. I'm gone. I'm done.